Harold West, founder of the retail corporation Westmart, has died at age 68. That headline appeared across every morning news outlet, CNBC, Reuters, and local radio. But no one knew he was still alive. At exactly 4:27 a.m., he was on his hands and knees scrubbing the restroom floor of the headquarters he founded. No one recognized the frail man with silver hair in a pale blue uniform as Harold West, formerly one of the most influential figures in Western American retail. No one recognized him because he chose to be invisible. When he led Westmart each morning, Harold arrived earlier than anyone, not to show off, but to smell the fresh polish, check the lighting in the lobby, or straighten a misaligned product display. He still came early via the freight elevator, non-public doors, averting cameras and eye contact. Since his death, everything changed swiftly. His son, Evan, became CEO 36 hours after the press release. Shareholders approved, the media praised it as a strategic generational handover, and the stock ticked upward. Only Harold was silent, watching it all. He faked his death, not to escape, but to observe. If you want to see where your company is rotting, sometimes you must disappear from its surface, he once wrote in his worn notebook, the one he still carried next to his heart. After cleaning the restroom, unthankful and unseen, Harold meandered down the cold, white-tiled corridor. A giant photograph of his award, Inspirational Entrepreneur 2010, had been replaced. The plaque no longer read, Builder of Foundations One Brick at a Time. Now it read, Westmart, Speed. Scale, Growth. He bowed his head and continued. Floor tiles clicked underfoot, lifeless. He pulled out a silver pocket watch engraved with 312. The same time his foster father, a night shift supermarket worker, collapsed and died from exhaustion. On the back was etched, If you pay for someone's time, respect their whole life. In his era, Walmart didn't discuss headcount optimization. It had a dual lifeline policy, honoring employees as emotional shareholders. Now, boardroom reports read, reduce labor hours by 20%, streamline shifts, and eliminate provisional roles. Signed by his son. Harold's first assignment was cleaning the top-tier executive conference room, the very place where he once sat through hundreds of strategic meetings. He quietly gathered leftover water bottles, crumpled sticky notes, and discarded coffee cups. He wasn't planning to enter until he heard voices. He pushed open the door slightly and paused. On the other side was Margot Lane, the new HR director hired just 3 months after Harold's announcement. She was on the phone, voice crisp and matter-of-fact. We need a clean solution for removing underperformers. I don't care about their circumstances. If someone doesn't adapt, they shouldn't exist in the system. Harold didn't move. He just stood and listened. Those words echoed from a meeting he refused to sign back in 2018. Then he called it the language of machines, not of people. Now his son revived it as a gospel in leadership. After his shift, Harold headed to the maintenance break room, where a rusted locker and a creaky wooden table awaited. He placed a small photo inside, a security camera blueprint of the ground floor and basement, viewed from the custodial vantage point. Earlier that break, he'd walked into an adjacent utility corridor and retrieved a skeleton key he had crafted from an old spare he once kept. He entered the server room, plugged in his old flash drive, and accessed hidden administrative archives, emails analyzed by AI, capturing employee sentiment. My leave request was denied for the 3rd week in a row. Don't know how long I can keep going. Margot said personal feelings aren't in the KPI. Evans' cut-to-cafeteria budget means no reason to stay after hours. He stopped reading and focused on backing up every file. He needed proof, and, more deeply, to save the stories of those who believed nobody was listening. That night, Harold sat alone in the dimly lit underground parking lot. A young staff member passed by, hesitated, then nodded politely and moved on. The boy had been demoted from technical work for lacking ambition. Moments later, Harold scribbled on a small note and tucked it into his uniform pocket. Ambition can't be forced. It grows when people feel heard. He didn't intend to deliver it immediately, but knew the right moment would come. As he left the basement, raindrops tapped softly on the ceiling, and the corridor lights flickered like an old heart beating unevenly. His pocket watch still read 3:12. He didn't check it, he just pressed it gently against his chest. Tomorrow morning, he'd stand outside the door of the executive strategy meeting, not to listen in, but to see with new clarity what others chose not to say. The next morning, puddles from overnight rain clung to the glass of the 6th floor. The executive boardroom's chairs were neatly aligned, and the quarterly KPI slides were ready. Harold positioned himself just outside the door, broom and mop in hand. No one noticed him. He was just part of the building's backdrop, like a hidden socket or a faded notice board. Suddenly, the door swung open and Evan exited. It had been nearly a year since father and son last saw each other. Since the fake death, Harold followed his son's moves only through press releases and video clips, never in person. Evan was crisply dressed in his gray suit and cool tie, phone in hand, eyes on the future. Yes, proceed with removing non-performing assets. No, Dad wouldn't object. Trust me. Harold froze. Dad wouldn't object. The words cut through him. Evan had no idea Harold was standing just 3 feet away, holding a mop, heartbeat echoing inside him. Evan passed by without a glance, the fragrance fading almost as soon as he passed. Harold watched him move, confident, cold, hollow. The boardroom door closed. Inside, pens tapped, slides clicked, and executives spoke sharply. Outside, Harold settled on the hallway bench, not to listen in, but to sense the tone of a culture he once built and no longer recognized. A security guard approached and asked, "Aren't you heading home yet?" "You've been here long after your shift." Harold, "I'm waiting for someone." Guard, "Your wife?" Harold, "No, the person I thought I knew." With a polite smile, the guard walked away. Harold stayed, tracing the glass into the room where Evan presented, voice steady and confident. A perfect CEO, at least by the board's metrics. Later that day, Harold revisited the internal review he once gave to Evan as regional director. Strategically capable needs to learn that people aren't just performance units. Otherwise, you might run a system but never know how to hold on to the people who make it work. He'd believed Evan would absorb it. Perhaps he trusted too soon, or left too early. After work, he stopped by the utility area. There, Darryl, a middle-aged technician, struggled with a pressure valve. Harold quietly lit the work light so they could continue. Together, they fixed the leak, their work silent and steady. Darryl sighed. "When Mr. West was in charge, I never worried about losing my job just for taking 2 days off because my wife was sick." Harold. "Now?" Darryl. "An accidental email after hours is enough to get you pulled from the schedule." Harold nodded. Darryl didn't know who Harold was, and that was fine. He wasn't there for respect, but to hear the truths he'd created. The rain had returned by the time Harold left the warehouse. He'd just passed Cassie, a cashier suspended for 3 days without explanation under the new system. She stood shivering under the eaves, holding packed groceries. She didn't cry, but her eyes reflected brittle glass. Fragile, waiting for a kind gesture. Harold stepped forward, wordlessly handing her the umbrella from his cart. She spoke softly. "Thank you. No one's ever done that for me here." That night, Harold sat in the break room, old notebook in hand. He wrote, "If good people don't have the courage to protect what's right, then evil simply needs time to destroy every value." He closed the notebook, not to hide it, but to prepare it for the moment the world needed to read it. Still here? Maybe this echoes with you, not just loss or injustice, but that familiar feeling that some place you believed in has changed in ways unrecognizable. If so, stay. You're not alone. Every story told here reminds you are not the only one who felt this. 2 days later, Harold adjusted his schedule. He'd requested night shifts under the guise of health reasons. No one questioned the eccentric old janitor. On night duty, all management was gone. Only guards, technicians, and the silent guts of the building remained. At 10:43 p.m., Harold slipped through the hidden door beside the service corridor. In his pocket lay an encrypted hard drive, full of archived workforce data, personnel allocations, turnover rates, undisclosed reprimands. Tonight, he'd attach it to a maintenance terminal. The screen glowed. Founder override requested. The system sparked to life, granting him access through secret admin credentials he'd hidden long ago. He didn't change a thing. He observed, cross-referencing data on layoffs and personnel sentiment, preparing his dossier. The name less keepers of company soul. He plotted to highlight not executives, but the frontline caretakers, the unsung heroes marginalized by blind efficiency. 3 silent hours passed. Then 5 anonymous emails, shot from a defunct founder's account, landed in inboxes of veteran mid-managers. "If you still believe in what we built, come." Not for me, for those still unheard. No signatures, just an invitation. Later, a cryptic message on a voicemail. "I'm coming. Please don't make me hope again. Bethany." 3 days later, at 2 a.m., the basement parking. Empty except for one silver sedan. A tall woman stepped out. Bethany. No greeting, no question. She stared at Harold intently. "Be honest. Will you see this through, or vanish again?" Harold nodded with quiet resolve. "I'm staying." Not to reclaim anything, to ensure no more is lost. Bethany closed her mouth. "I have the disciplinary files Margot erased. These people didn't fail. They just had a conscience." They gathered in a dim storeroom behind the server closet. No titles, no agenda, just a handful of faces who once held the company's spirit. One mid-manager whispered, "I thought there was no changing the system from inside." Harold looked at them hard. "Since I built it, I'll dismantle it, nail by nail, not to break it, but to rebuild it right." The next morning, Evan received an anonymous email. "Everything is still here, but no one's looking at it anymore." Attached is a surveillance clip of an executive berating staff in the break room. Evan frowned. He felt someone was watching for the first time in months, undoing his carefully engineered silence. That evening, Harold returned to the break room. On the table, a small note. "Today, I heard the boss apologize to a staff member in the hallway. I don't know who did it, but thank you. Jay." Harold tucked it into his notebook. Underneath, he wrote, "Change doesn't require power." Just one person, brave enough to listen. No one knew what Harold was doing, but one person quietly connected to another. Anonymous emails began circulating through the internal network. People who had long stayed silent began to look at each other, slowly as if asking, "You see it too, don't you?" And that was what any authoritarian system feared the most. Not rebellion, but silent, shared understanding. The 21st floor conference room, where the board of directors met each quarter, always carried the hushed weight of power. Thick carpet, soundproof walls, walnut cabinets, and high-capacity air purifiers that never shut off. No noise, no voices, only decisions. That Wednesday, the Q2 Operations Review meeting convened. Margot, dressed in a sleek navy sheath dress, opened the session with a crisp, commanding voice. Personnel costs are down 6.2% over the last 3 months. Attrition has been reframed under new KPIs, and field reports indicate operational stability. Scattered applause. Evan sat at the end of the table, arms crossed, nodding slightly, like a conductor who believed every note was falling into place. At that moment, the presentation screen behind Margot flickered. No one noticed. The PowerPoint was abruptly cut out and replaced by a silent 12-second video. No sound, just images. A female employee was summoned into a closed office, trembling, while a manager shouted at her in front of others. A maintenance worker pushing an overloaded cart, nearly collapsing. No one in the hallway even glanced. A security guard tearing up a leave request in front of a junior employee saying, "This doesn't meet operational priorities." The boardroom froze. No one knew where the video came from. No input registered. No trace in the central system. A few board members furrowed their brows. Evan turned to Margot. She grimaced and signaled IT to shut it down. But the video kept playing, and at the end, a line of white text on a black screen. When polished reports hide exhausted faces, achievement loses all meaning. That afternoon, Harold was summoned to the 21st floor. Not as a founder. However, if someone is caught accessing the system without authorization, Evan sat across from him, a printed log showing 3 data access instances from an old, supposedly deactivated admin terminal. "Who are you?" Evan asked. Harold didn't answer immediately. He looked straight at his son and said, "The man who once taught you that no one should be invisible in a decent company." Evan froze, then gave a slight dismissive laugh. "You really think this will change anything? We're modernizing. Feelings don't pay the bills." "But people pay each other with emotions every day," Harold replied. "And if you run things with fear for long enough, eventually no one will be afraid anymore. They'll just leave." Margot entered. Her voice was as sharp as glass. "You resigned. You stepped away from the board. This could be considered internal breach. We could press charges." Harold stood, calmly opened his bag and pulled out a USB. He plugged it into the display. Not just the video, but altered KPI structures, internal memos instructing suppression of complaints, and one scanned document, stamped and signed, Grayson West Group, Founding Charter. Section 8. Should any board member compromise the humane corporate culture, the founder reserves the right to initiate emergency council proceedings. An old clause, long dismissed as ceremonial, but never revoked. That afternoon, an emergency meeting was called, not to fire anyone, but to ask a question the company hadn't asked in years. Are we serving our clients, or are we running a system that strangles the people inside it? Margot didn't attend. Evan sat in silence, stone-faced. But for the first time in months, a board member said aloud, "Maybe it's time we sit down with the guys loading boxes in the warehouse." Later that day, Harold walked through the parking lot under the fog. No one called him CEO. No one patted him on the back. But a night shift worker, Daryl, approached, gently placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Don't know who did what, but lately people are asking each other's names again. Not just walking past like we're furniture." Harold didn't reply. He just nodded, quietly memorizing each face, slowly turning toward the others, like a team waking from a long sleep. Harold said nothing during the entire board meeting that day. He just listened. Occasionally, he flipped a few pages, made a mark, and looked each person straight. Not to judge, but not to retreat either. After the meeting, he didn't return to the office. He signed no termination papers. Instead, he held an internal discussion at the West Side warehouse, once known for having the highest turnover rate in the entire company. He didn't send invitations. No one was required to attend. He simply placed a sign at the entrance. If you've ever thought, "I don't have the right to speak," this is where you begin. Over 30 people gathered during the lunch break. No one knew who Harold was. They only saw an older man in a plain uniform setting up plastic chairs and placing a water cooler nearby. He didn't start with theory. How many of you have ever been graded without being asked anything first? 3 hands went up, then 5, then 10. Eventually, most of them. A logistics worker, shirt stained with mud, said, "They marked me as low engagement because I don't chat with my boss, but my boss hasn't spoken to anyone in 6 months, just sends orders by email." Another worker, voice hoarse, "I was marked not proactive because I took 3 days off to care for my son's burn injuries." Harold didn't take notes, he just listened and nodded. And every time someone finished, he asked, "So, in your opinion, how should a fair system respond?" Harold sent a reform proposal to the central HR department 3 days later. The subject line wasn't adjustment request, it was a proposal to listen, not from me, but from 418 unheard voices. Attached was a 12-page PDF compiling feedback from 5 branches Harold had quietly visited in the past 2 weeks. At the end of each comment was one closing line. Signed, someone not invisible. When the proposal began circulating internally, the response wasn't resistance. It was silence. Then, swift momentum. A formerly rigid manager replied by email, "I used to think fairness meant no favoritism." But maybe fairness also means understanding someone's situation before judging it. An anonymous message from a veteran staff member at the East Division said, "I cried when someone asked me, 'When was the last time you felt accurately evaluated?' Thank you, whoever you are." Evan called. His voice was no longer threatening, but unmistakably frustrated. "You're stirring chaos, Dad. People need structure." "KPIs are the foundation of measurement," Harold answered calmly. "KPIs aren't wrong, Evan, but they're just whips and suits if they come without context and empathy." A week later, at the Southern Branch, a small note appeared on the internal bulletin board. "If you feel your performance reviews don't reflect your actual work, write a letter. Drop it in the sealed box, someone will read it." In 10 days, over 200 letters were submitted. The first person to read each one was Harold. One note from a new hire signing only as A. "Read, I don't expect things to change. But writing this made me feel like maybe I'm not just a shadow anymore." That night, Harold didn't return to HQ. He stopped by a small branch once used as a test site for the new KPI model. There, a staffer named Omar, once suspended for failing the Internal Adaptability Index, opened the back door for him. Harold stepped into the break room and looked around, not searching for evidence, but to see himself again. "Omar," he said, "you used to lead the warehouse ops team. Now you have to manually request every hour of overtime. Do you still want to stay?" Omar gave a dry chuckle. "I thought I'd quit. But now someone's finally asked me that, so I'll stay 1 more week, just to see if this is real." Harold nodded. "And if it's not, walk away, but if it is, then help me clean up this wreckage, 1 person at a time." Margot didn't get angry. Not right away, she didn't need to. She knew how to wait. While Harold held internal conversations across the branches, Margot quietly began reasserting control from the inside. An email was sent to the Internal Communications Department. Unofficial dialogues are disrupting information flow and lowering productivity. Please limit unmoderated internal sharing. A new performance review form was silently updated. Operational alignment score may affect quarterly bonus eligibility. Harold noticed. He wasn't surprised, because he had built this system once, and he knew. True, lasting change doesn't come from winning in boardrooms. It comes when people start acting differently, even when no one's watching. One morning, Harold visited the Western Branch unannounced. In the cold storage unit, Marcus, a middle-aged floor worker, showed a trainee how to operate the pallet lift. Use both hands. Don't push too hard. Smooth rhythm, that's how the machine lasts. Harold watched quietly from a distance. As Marcus turned to walk away, Harold asked, "Who taught you how to take care of the machine like that?" Marcus shrugged. "No one. Just figured. If I don't, the next guy gets sore hands, and if he's out, the whole team's behind." Harold smiled. "If I asked you to train 3 others each week, would you do it?" "What title comes with that?" "No title, just the group's rhythm keeper." Marcus nodded. "If I get to choose the people, I'm in." Meanwhile, at headquarters, Margot began quietly pushing to restrict Harold's access to internal systems. A tech-side email read, "Legacy founder credentials are causing data ownership conflicts, temporarily disabling access to Tier C systems." But Harold was a step ahead. He no longer needed system access, because he had begun shifting power from authority to people. He reached out to 9 longtime staffers, once called the culture bearers of the early company days. They had gone quiet, labeled outdated, but they had stayed for their reasons. Harold said, "I don't need you to change the whole organization. I just need you to keep your corner from falling silent." They agreed, not for titles, but because, for the first time, someone gave them official space to protect what was humane. At a warehouse on the city's edge, Elena, a former logistics lead demoted for being non-adaptive to digital systems, started a team journal. At the end of each shift, employees could write a single line. "Who helped you today?" "What made you feel valuable?" "If something needs changing, where would you begin?" Participation wasn't mandatory, but 63 handwritten lines filled its pages within 2 weeks, most unsigned. One stood out. "I used to think this job meant nothing, but I cried when I read what my coworkers wrote about me." Meanwhile, Margot ramped up internal meetings, working to reclaim operational authority. "We need speed. Emotions are a luxury in business." "Staff don't need empathy, they need discipline." Some nodded, but others started going quiet. Not the quiet of agreement, but the kind that meant, "I don't believe you anymore." Harold didn't argue, he just kept walking, from warehouse to branch, from lobby to break room, quietly returning people their right to choose, speak, and be heard. One evening, he sat in the tiny break room behind the company's oldest branch. A young delivery clerk walked in. "I don't know who you are, but yesterday I saw this line in the team journal. 'No job is small when you're being listened to.' I think that's true, that's all." The boy walked off. No replies expected. Harold just stayed where he was, nodding to himself, like someone who had waited years just to hear that one line echo back. The main conference room on the 18th floor, usually reserved for high-level strategy sessions, felt different today. No one was smiling. No coffee in sight, just silence. Tense, sharp. It was as if the company's body was about to reject one of its organs. Harold walked in. No badge, no tablet, no slides. He simply placed a small wooden box in the center of the table and then took a seat. Margot was the first to speak. "We called this meeting to address the following breaches by Mr. Harold: organizing internal dialogues without going through comms, reassigning staff roles across branches without HR authorization, unilaterally altering evaluation procedures without formal approval." Each bullet point appeared on the screen, like a list of charges. Harold didn't interrupt. He looked each person in the eye, not with defiance, but with something this room hadn't felt in a long time, meaning. "I don't deny any of those points," Harold said. Margot raised an eyebrow. "I did all of it, but not to break the system. I did it to remember why the system existed in the first place." He opened the wooden box. Inside were scraps of handwritten paper, no printouts, no names, just short lines, some blurred with tears. "My hours were cut because I took time off to care for my dying father. I got a low rating for skipping team building on the anniversary of my mom's death. No one asked why I was tired, they only asked why I wasn't smiling at customers." Harold looked up. "These are the things our system never records." A branch director, previously close to Margot, sighed. "Harold, emotions are good, but companies run on systems, not emotional journals." Harold smiled gently, unoffended. "I'm not asking to replace the process. I just want us to remember, processes weren't made to simplify management. They were made to protect the people doing the work." The air remained cold. Margot didn't strike again. Instead, she made her final move. "Then tell us, Harold, what keeps a company alive? Feelings or KP is?" Harold looked directly at her. "Neither. It's trust. If our people don't trust the system, it doesn't matter how great the numbers look, because illusions don't sell the truth." Silence. A senior finance executive, quiet until now, finally spoke. "Last week, voluntary resignations dropped 14% across the 6 branches that adopted Harold's model. Internal survey positivity doubled." He looked around the room. "We're witnessing what no system predicts. People stay when they feel alive." Margot remained composed, but the sharpness in her eyes softened. Not because she lost, but because, for the first time, someone wasn't trying to win by rules, but by reason. The meeting ended. No minutes were taken. No one was fired. But starting that day, a new line was quietly added to the company's internal policy. Every operational policy must include at least one piece of feedback from those directly affected. That night, Harold returned to the 3rd floor of the first branch, where he had once worked as a security guard. The tiny break room, bathed in soft yellow light, had a new note pinned to the wall. "If you've ever gone unheard, now's the time to speak." And beneath it, written in marker, "I used to think no one cared, but today I started writing, because I know someone out there is reading." The internal bulletin displayed a cold, crisp headline: "GRN 2.0, Full Structural Overhaul, Standardizing Operations with AI Governance." Below is an opening statement from Margot. "To remain at the forefront, our company must rely on a system free of sentiment, where performance and accountability are measured by data, not emotion. This is an inevitable step forward." The new system was named Argus, a deep learning AI platform that integrates employee behavior data, KPIs, surveillance footage, order logs, and even vocal tone analysis from customer service calls. Argus would score emotional performance and potential loyalty. No need for human managers. No need for listening, just surveillance. Harold received official notice. His co-founders' sign-off rights were suspended. An extraordinary shareholders' meeting would be held in 5 days. Margot had secured enough support to end his final influence. He didn't react immediately. That evening, Harold returned to a small suburban branch, where Kendra, once forced to resign for requesting time off to care for her child, had sparked a quiet wave of reform. She sat at a desk, adjusting the night shift schedule by hand. With the new system, Harold said gently, AI will assign shifts. Kendra didn't look up. Will I know what time my child starts coughing? He said nothing. She continued, I'm not afraid of being replaced. I'm afraid I'll become someone who no longer remembers why she works at all. The next day, Harold released a video. Not through internal channels. No branded intro, no music, just him, sitting on a plastic chair in a break room. I'm not against technology. I just believe it should support humanity, not erase it. A scoring system that doesn't understand you were late because you dropped your child off isn't fairness. If an AI can reduce your hours just because you were quiet in a meeting, the next thing it might do is silence you forever. At the end, he said one line, If you've ever felt no one cared what you thought, now is the time to write it down. Within 36 hours, more than 1,800 responses flooded a special inbox titled Real People, Real Stories. Some stories needed no analytics. I was rated inflexible for refusing night shifts. I live with my mom. She has Alzheimer's. Argus isn't wrong. It just doesn't have a heart. I'm not against AI. I just don't want to become a piece of data with no footnote. The day of the shareholder meeting arrived. Margot presented charts, projections, and efficiency models. She was the embodiment of airtight logic. When it was Harold's turn, he brought no presentation. He simply placed a file of over 400 printed handwritten letters on the table, straight from the Real People inbox. He said, I built this company by hand, brick by brick, person by person, not to see it become a machine that cuts out souls for not being profitable. I'm not asking for power. I'm asking for one thing. Keep the right to be heard for everyone who ever thought silence was their only way to survive. No vote was cast that day, but as the room emptied, one major shareholder stood up quietly. When Harold spoke, I didn't just hear him. I remembered myself, 20 years ago, asking for time off when my child was sick, and being told I lacked commitment. No reply, none needed. Because some things, if lost, would leave a company with no reason to exist. A week after the meeting, an internal memo was sent. Mr. Harold Whitaker has officially stepped down from his executive co-founder role. The Argus system will be fully implemented company-wide within 60 days. No explanation, no thank you note, no farewell photo, like an employee quietly clocking out after their last shift. Harold left the headquarters with a cloth backpack. No send-off, no goodbye speech. He wasn't sad, because he knew real change had never lived in the corner office. It lived in those who kept acting when no one was watching. At Branch 19, once ranked highest in resignations, a small wooden board appeared in the break room, unapproved. The silent book. Right here if you were too afraid to speak. Within a week, both sides of the notebook were filled. They called me excess for being quiet, but I've stocked this warehouse for 3 years, never missed a shift. I almost quit, but after that talk with Mr. Harold, I stayed. I believed the company could be kind again. The system can scan faces, but only people can understand a tired smile. Argus rolled out anyway. The press praised the system. Margot was awarded Transformation Architect of the Year. She didn't need to know, or chose not to know, that staff had learned how to work around the system quietly in many branches. At the Southern Depot, Marcus, the same man Harold once spoke to near the pallets, was now the team's silent metronome. No official title. But after every shift, anyone with something on their mind came to him. One day, a new hire asked, "Aren't you afraid of getting a low score?" Marcus smiled. Low scores can be fixed. But if you're scared to speak the truth, even a perfect score won't save you from hating your day. At checkout counter number 5, Kendra was the unspoken team lead once dismissed and now respected. No formal promotion, just mutual trust. She didn't send weekly slide decks. Instead, behind her station hung one line, "I can't promise to shield you from all unfairness, but I won't let you face it alone." One early autumn morning, Kendra received a small parcel. No sender. Inside was an old notebook. The first page read, "I no longer hold the company's keys, but I hope you'll be the one to keep the door open." Harold's handwriting. In the end, it became clear. While Argus flagged emotional underperformance in 8 branches, customer satisfaction scores improved. The system couldn't explain it. The reports couldn't justify it. But the people inside knew. Real people had returned, not to perform, but to serve as their whole selves. Margot Chen sat in her 28th floor office. The building was silent. Argus had just completed Update 3.2, integrating real-time voice sentiment analysis. Everything was working as she had planned. No incidents, no disruptions, no surprises. She had it all, and yet she couldn't sleep. Every night the voice in her head wasn't quarterly earnings. It was Harold's from the video. A system that doesn't understand why someone is silent has no right to judge their contribution. She played that clip again and again. Strange, wasn't it? That man no longer worked here. She had won. So why did she feel like she was slowly disappearing? A week later, Margot visited Branch 12 unannounced. No company car, no entourage, just a baseball cap, a coarse fabric jacket, and a clipboard disguised as an internal survey. She walked into the stock counter. A young employee, Jay, was logging inventory. "Hi, do you have 5 minutes to answer a workplace experience survey?" Jay looked up, tired, but nodded. "Sure, but I'll be honest, not scripted." "Even better," Margot replied. Jay looked at her directly. "I don't hate the system. I hate how it's used as a moral scoreboard without any context. Argus doesn't know I stayed late to cover someone who had an emergency, but it still flagged me as low initiative for not submitting my report on time." He paused, then asked, "Do you think someday the system you built might kick you out too?" Margot didn't answer, just smiled faintly, her first unguarded smile in weeks. That night, Margot logged into Argus, not to monitor, but to see. She opened the lowest emotional performance rankings, watched every clip and listened to every call. One employee marked as cold was holding it together while being insulted by a customer. Another, flagged for low engagement, had helped a colleague who fainted, forgetting to clock out. She saw them, the small human acts of kindness that the system had never acknowledged. Margot removed her headset, sat still. The next morning, a strange notification appeared company-wide. Argus 4.0, update paused. Priority shift, adjusting emotional context model. No one knew who ordered it. At the bottom, a quiet line appeared. Misunderstanding, even by technology, is still injustice. And injustice repeated will destroy trust. Weeks later, silent changes began. Branches gained authority to customize evaluation policies based on local conditions. Managers were retrained to interpret data alongside human context, not just raw metrics. Argus rolled out a new feature, Human Notes, a space for employees to share their context so the algorithm can learn from it. No applause, no awards. But people started working a little lighter. Not because the system was perfect, but because they knew someone, somewhere, was truly listening. Harold returned one drizzly afternoon. No notice. No one recognized him. Argus no longer stored his biometric data. He was just a customer now, waiting quietly at checkout. Kendra was helping an older man count change. Marcus was teaching a new hire how to scan discount codes, for the fourth time that day just as patiently. Linda was writing a new sign by hand. A smile is free, yet it creates value beyond measure. Harold watched them. He didn't interrupt, didn't say who he was. When it was his turn, Kendra looked up. "Hi there. Rainy day today. Shopping alone must feel a bit chilly." Harold smiled, gently, sincerely. "Yeah, but it's warmer in here." Kendra didn't recognize him at first, but as their eyes met, something paused. Then she smiled, the kind of smile that says thank you without words. She rang up the last item and handed him the receipt. "Take care, okay?" Our immune systems forget how to respond on time these days. Harold nodded, took the bag, and turned away. No need to say more. He didn't have to stay. On the way out, he passed a board, not an ad. It's not a system directive, just a handwritten sign beneath a flickering LED display. This is no longer just a place to work. It's a place where people choose who to become, even when no one's watching. Harold stood still for a moment. Then I walked out into the rain, just like everyone else. No one called his name, no one saw him off. But behind him, a young employee ran out from the break room, holding an umbrella. "Sir, did you forget your umbrella?" I had an extra. Please take it." Harold accepted it. His nod, slow, steady, said enough. The system didn't keep him, but the people within it had learned to keep each other.